to another week of Starting to Scale with Emmy Faust. I hope you like my new music. It was written for me by an amazing composer called Charlotte Raven, and I just asked her for something uplifting, energetic, and something that would make me feel like I want to have a little bit of a dance. So I'm really happy with it. I hope you like it too. And today I've got a fantastic lady who is also a friend called Rebecca Morley, and she's a leadership coach who works with entrepreneurs and businesses that are scaling up. She's got loads of expertise and experience in working in this space, and we're talking about how 60% of businesses in the UK don't make it to the 5-year mark, and one of the reasons for that is there is a huge gap in leadership skills in this country. So in this chat, we're talking about the difference between a leadership coach, a business growth consultant, and a non-exec director, and when you might want to get that kind of support and at what phase in your business journey. So if you want to identify what support your business needs right now, if you're wondering what the difference is between a business coach, a business growth consultant like me, and a non-exec director, and when you are likely to need each of them, then do have a listen to this episode. It's a really, I really enjoyed this episode because we also talked about things like what qualities to look for in a non-exec director and how to set the scene to get your relationship off to the best possible start. So let's get on with the show. Today on Starting to Scale, we have Rebecca Morley, who is an amazing coach, leadership coach, and we've kind of got the same, we work in the same space. We work with entrepreneurs and businesses that are scaling up, and she's got loads of experience, so I thought it'd be great to get her on the podcast. Rebecca, do tell us a little bit about you and some of the clients, the kind of clients that you work with. That'd be fantastic.
Thanks, Emmy. So I am, as Emmy said, a leadership coach and consultant. So I work with predominantly scale-up businesses who are making the move towards having bigger teams. So I work with companies who've gone through that early startup phase. They've proven the concept. They know who their customer base is. They've got probably quite a strong presence in market. In fact, generally quite a strong presence in market. And the dust's starting to settle, if you like, and they're starting to take on a bigger and bigger team, probably more specialists, probably more senior people. And I work with the leaders in those businesses to work out what that means for them, because quite often what happens is startup businesses or early stage scale-up businesses take on people who are of kind of mid-seniority in bigger businesses, and they bring them across to be quite senior people in their business. And that means that although there's a huge amount of enthusiasm and intelligence there, often those people don't have the really senior leadership experience that you would expect in a lot bigger businesses of people in those similar roles. Deal with what that means for them. Sometimes it can be a really lonely place because you're suddenly expected to know so much without the framework of that bigger business to support you, without the leadership development what's the word I'm looking for, support that you would expect in a bigger business. And it can be a really lonely place to be. And I've been there. So I worked in a much smaller market when I was at Reckitt Benckiser. I went from the UK business, which was one of the biggest in the world, to the Irish business, which was one of the smallest in the world. And I went from being a kind of mid-level manager to supply chain director in that role. And I really, really struggled. So I've been there, I've been through those challenges and actually come out the other end as well. And I use a lot of my big business experience to bring to bear.
That's fantastic. And I know from, setting up and scaling businesses myself, it can be really lonely, can't it? As an entrepreneur, as a business founder, everyone's looking to you, all your staff and everyone's looking to you for the answers. And sometimes this is the first time you've done it and you do feel like finding your own feet. And I think that's why having, we were talking about this, the importance of having senior people who have got that experience and who can empathize and who can guide you. I mean, that's why I think it's so important for these businesses to have people like you or me or whoever it might be going in and helping them navigate it, because it is really lonely and really challenging as well.
Hugely lonely, and very challenging, and actually quite exhausting as well, I think. And you're building resilience all the time. You're having to, but also there's expectations of you from that team that you've brought in. In order to sell the move to somebody to come from those big businesses that have got private healthcare and massive development plan opportunities and really big promotional opportunities, to get people to come from those businesses to take a risk on your scaling business, where you kind of, you're working on more hope than experience in a lot of cases. They've then got really high expectations of you as well. So the pressure is immense. And I think, Emmy, the businesses you work with as well, they're often taking on investment at the same time. So you've got this added pressure of investors to then kind of think about, and it's enormously pressurized. And actually being able to grow in a leadership capacity, to become the leader that you want intentionally and kind of confidently, can be exceptionally hard in that space and at that stage of business. So yeah,
I always kind of wish, we did have a brilliant non-exec director, but I always wish that looking back, I think, we could have really done with some coaching, the kind of coaching that you do, or some extra, I think the more expertise and the more learning and the more personal development you can do as a leader, kind of like the better, because I was lucky I had a business partner to kind of support me. But still, it was really challenging, and we didn't necessarily have someone that we could turn to work through some of those challenging times. And obviously you have wobbles, don't you, as a business owner?
Definitely. I've actually done quite a lot of business partner coaching as well, interestingly, because when you are business partners and you've got that really strong partnership, actually those same kind of pressures can impact your relationship quite strongly.
Yeah,
because
totally.
you become different people under pressure quite a lot. I think, and life happens as well to you outside of that, and it's a big journey, right? So I've done a bit of kind of, it's like marriage counselling, but
I think we talked about this before, and I think it's really important. So either you're on your own and you don't have a business partner and you're lacking support, and it can be lonely, like we said, and then you obviously need that guidance and accountability and support and just someone to be there on your journey with you. But if you've got a business partner, that can also be challenging, because if you don't both have the same end vision or goal or values or something like that, or just like you said, when you're married to someone, you're always going to have your ups and downs. And I think you mentioned this before, but I said to you, I think that's really great. Business partner coaching, I think, it's almost like everyone who has a business partner should have a coach who has got both of their backs and wants the best for the business, probably from day one, absolutely. Actually.
Yeah, because getting off to that really strong start as partners in a business and having those frameworks in place for how you're going to work through issues, how you're going to make decisions, how you're going to demonstrate a united front with the team, all of those things are quite difficult to sort of set out for each other sometimes without an external facilitator.
And also, I think, when you start a business with your business partner, it's very different to in the startup phase. And, maybe you haven't even thought about what happens when you scale up. You might not have even had those discussions or conversations about your end goal, and if it's a lifestyle business, or if you want to grow it, to scale it, to sell it. And I think, again, that's really key, isn't it? Just to be able to have those honest conversations.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We could do I'd love to do a whole podcast episode on that. There we go. That's definitely one, because I know so many business partners that I've worked with where there have been issues and problems and they don't see eye to eye, and what they set up initially is not what the business turned into. And actually, I think that would be a really, really good podcast episode. So let's do that another time. What we were going to talk about today was, and I think this is really important, what's your take on the difference between a non-exec director, someone like you, like a business leadership coach, and someone like me, a business growth consultant? And just quickly, what I've realized with some of the startups who are scaling up is they're not even that knowledgeable about the board and how it works. You know, a lot of startups who are serious about scaling up haven't actually understood the importance of a diverse board and even actually what a non-exec director does. So I'd love you to sort of say in your own words what you feel is relevant, or at what point in the journey do people get those experts in?
I think it's different per business, but I'll probably talk about it in general terms just to make it easier to have the conversation, because we could talk about all the different nuances of business. In terms of stage, for me, and you may disagree with this because I'm probably looking at it from the point of view of how I see business consultants working, but I think I know, where you work as well. For me, the kind of business consultant, business growth consultant phase is where you, or not even the phase actually, because the phase is, it's as important what you come in to do as the phase. But I see you coming into your own as a business consultant at the point at which a startup has realized they can't go any further on their own with their current processes, their current kind of mentality around certain things that you help with, like cash flow and vision and some of the processes that they need in place. And I think you get them to that sort of grown up phase or stage. You help them with external expertise on how things should work, bringing in that experience of having run another business and seen it through from the very early stage right through to exit, right? So you've been on that whole life cycle historically. And I think without having been on that whole life cycle, it's very difficult to know what to do next to get you to that next stage. And I think you can bring in that external experience. And actually, when I started my journey, I thought I could bring a lot of big business experience to bear to do a lot of that kind of business growth consultancy stuff. And I realized quite quickly that because every startup and scale up journey is very different, and I hadn't ever seen a business through to exit, and I hadn't ever gone to Series A, B, C rounds to get investment, that actually I couldn't do that business consultancy piece. I couldn't, although I could bring a lot of experience on kind of what processes are needed and how to run cash flow and how to lead a team and all of those kind of things, that I wasn't experienced enough in the startup scale up space to consult on how they should work. So it's quite interesting having met you and seeing you do an amazing job of that.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome. So I see you as being kind of, that it's sort of mentor plus, isn't it? It's really bringing that experience and not being afraid to tell people what they need. But also I know that you do it really bespoke and you don't come in with kind of one size fits all. And when we're talking about business consultants in this space, I think I would really kind of counsel any scale up or startup on really being cautious of anybody that comes in with a one size fits all approach, because I think there are businesses out there, there are business growth consultants out there that will come in with a very, very prescribed approach to how to grow your business. And I've seen startups that I've worked with spend a lot of money on those kind of programs, and they're not appropriate, I don't think, for a lot of businesses.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, because it totally depends on the sector you're in. It depends whether you're B2C, B2B. It depends. Oh, it's just same. There's so many different things that come into it.
There is. There's a huge amount of different things. And I think what happens actually is some of those more prescribed or prescriptive programs are cheaper than a business coach or consultant would be. And so people think they're a better option. And actually they end up getting a business consultant in later down the line to unravel the mess that it's created. And
I'm sure
coach to do that.
I'm sure, like me, you've been into businesses and you've scaled up here, and there's been a huge amount of money wasted in the past, which is obviously a real shame. But that does happen.
Definitely. So that's consultant for me. And then in terms of the difference between a consultant and a coach, I'd say that I specialize more on, so I guess with, if I was to break it down into very simple terms, I think you come in and talk to people about the what they need to be doing, and then probably some of the how. I come in, I believe, and talk to them about who they need to be to lead that business. And it's not me coming in and telling them who to be. I really help them to think through who they want to be known for. So what do they want their team to be saying about them? What would they be proud to say about themselves in 5 years' time if they could really articulate how they'd run that business? Who do they want to be in terms of how they work with investors, with suppliers, with customers? What do they want to be known for? What do they want to be famous for? And really help them to get clear on their value set as well around that, and how it all links together with their purpose and their values and their beliefs.
And that's really important, isn't it? Because you're, as a business founder or owner, you impact so many people, your staff, your suppliers, your customers, the stakeholders, the environment. You're responsible for the way that you impact so many people. And I think I like the way that you're kind of challenging them and helping them navigate how they're going to show up and what they want to be known for. And so what would be what would be the challenges that you're helping them with at that point when you're coming in? So you're sort of probably coming in after I've done the work, quite a bit of the work, and got them to the point that they've secured their funding and they're scaling. And then you're coming in and helping them understand who they are as a leader. That's right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And really helping them to navigate some of the issues they're then coming up against from the point of view of who they want to be as that leader. So I would work with people typically over 6, 12, 18 months beyond. And so I hate the term. I wish I could come up with a new term for this, but we start off with their kind of getting really clear on what their leadership brand is. And that is all.
Brand.
Yeah. So if you're doing branding exercise on your business, you'd be thinking about, okay, what do you want people to be saying about you? What's the look and feel of how you want people to interact with your business? Because leadership, for me, is everything you do. It's the way you walk into a room. It's the conversations you have with people day to day when you're walking the floor. It's how you show up when you're doing an all hands meeting. It's how you decision make. It's how you answer an email. It's absolutely everything you do. People are building this picture of you as a leader, and people are building their own sense of how to interact with you. Initially, that's quite pressurizing for people to learn, because when a lot of the time I sit down with my clients and they see themselves as a sort of doer. They have different modes, they're the doer, and then it's kind of, and when I have to lead, how do I do that?
But you don't get taught that, do you? I mean, it's sort of like, I suppose when you set up a business, for most people, some people obviously set up multiple businesses, but when you set up your first business, it's all new and you've probably never led a team before. And I think that's a huge amount of pressure. And also, as you said, with everything else going on, you could potentially lead in a way that you don't want to lead because of the stress and everything else. Whereas actually you're saying, sit back, let's work out the kind of leader that you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got this almost, and anybody who's got a startup or a scale-up business will have done the branding piece. So they know that you have a branding document, you have your colours, you have your logo, you have the words that describe the business. And you should have that in mind for you as well as a person, as a leader of that business. And then you should be reflecting on how you've shown up versus how you wanted to show up. What is that leadership brand that you've set up for yourself, and how are you doing against that? What are the brand values, the values that you have personally, and are you maintaining those? Would people say, if one of your values is that you want to be fair, or fun, or what's the open, gracious, all of these kind of words that people come up with, then I help them to reflect on how they're doing against that, because that's who they want to be to lead the business. And the way you show up against that leadership brand actually impacts the tone of the way everybody does everything in your business. It's the shadow you cast.
So is that what you're kind of reviewing with them? You say you're with them for 6 to 18 months. Is that what some of what you're going, working with them on every week or every session?
Yeah. In my kind of, in the pack I send people when I talk to them about coaching initially, and then I send them a pack to sort of really think about the different roles that a one-to-one coach can take. One of them is to be that mirror for you, to hold the mirror up to you and say, this is how you're behaving, and is that how you want to be viewed, or is that the person that you want to be in this role? Excuse me. And you don't really get it from anywhere else necessarily in a way that really challenges you, because you don't get it from your team, because usually you're working on really transactional stuff with your team, and also
you're employing them,
yeah. So it is very difficult to know the impact that you're having and the perception that you're creating, and working with a coach can help you understand yourself and how you're responding to things. It can help you understand the perception that you're creating, and also help you to understand the impact of the decisions that you're making day to day on both how you're perceived but also the business success.
But quickly, before we move on to the non-exec director bit, just is having a kind of a leadership coach or an executive coach, or someone like you, is that quite the norm now? Because when I first started my business, I was 25, so that was 17 years ago, and I would have loved something like that. I just don't think it was kind of the norm, and I just wondered, so now if you've got a scale up, is it almost like guaranteed? Are you finding it that everyone is very open to having coaching, or is it still something that not everyone is totally au fait with or seeing the value?
I think it's moved from being something that only the enlightened few have, and I think there's a lot more openness from certainly people like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, I can probably think of a few others if I spent a bit of time on it, but there's quite a lot of those sort of figurehead people that have really talked very openly now about thinking that they probably couldn't have got to where they did, sanely at least, without a business coach. And I think the idea of it is becoming much more kind of mainstream, if you like. I still think there's a huge amount of misunderstanding about what a coach can do for you. And I was talking to somebody about it yesterday. There's coaching, the sort of McDonald's type coaching of like Tony Robbins and all of those guys, which is really kind of brash and about sort of designing your best life and having private jets and all that I'm just not about. And then there's the other sort of very, very corporate side of it, which is people like the businesses I used to work for, so Reckitt's and people like that, do bring in corporate coaches for their exec and beyond, actually, although I think it's seen as being quite remedial in some cases. If you've got a coach in those businesses, if you're middle management, it's seen as kind of fixing problems. And then I think there's this massive middle kind of ground where there's all these independent one-to-one coaches like me who are operating with individuals. And I think there's a very strong theme of people who work with coaches who understand the benefit of it, but I still think there's also loads of people that are still in that position that you've just described that you were in, that could really do with that help, but don't know that coaching can support them there. And I don't know where that educational piece needs to come from.
It will change though, won't it? I think, because in like America, it's just like, totally normal, and I'm sure that it will. I already see it changing. I've got a business coach, and I think, in fact, I've got two different ladies that I work with, and I get loads of value from both of them. And I think that we all need that kind of accountability, the guidance, the support, the kindness, and also, like you were saying, the mirroring, and sort of just saying, is this how you want to show up?
And yeah, exactly. And I think the other two big roles that I take, or maybe there's three, but I think once you get to that sort of level of seniority, there's no cheerleader for you anymore. Maybe your mum.
Yeah.
You're doing really well, darling. Keep going. I don't really know what you do, but keep going.
Yeah. Someone to say, well done.
There's no one to say, well done. There's no one to come back in from that brilliant meeting or that amazing, decision you've made or that brilliant kind of deal you've secured. There's no one to really talk to you about what you did in that, because everybody else is sort of, they just expect that because you're that senior and you're running the show. Or I don't always work with just CEOs and founders. I work with the next level down as well. So I work with CCOs, COOs, sales directors, kind of those sort of creative directors, those sort of people as well. But there's literally no one to be like, yeah, well done, or to say you've got this before it happens. You can do it. Go. Come back to me and tell me how you got on. It just
I think it's great to have that.
Yeah, and there's also that sort of other side of that as well, the role that I play, which is to be that sort of safe harbour, to come in and lick your wounds and feel a bit sorry for yourself sometimes, and somebody then to sort of push you back out into the world.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because your husband or wife or your friends or whatever, they maybe don't want to talk to them about your business stuff anyway, or you don't want to burden them with it, or it's not really that interesting to them. So to have someone who has got your back and that understands you and has been with you, I think that's really, really important to have that support. That's why I have a coach. And so quickly, just explain to us where a non-exec director would fit in, because obviously at the level of clients that you're working with, they'll be thinking about pulling in non-exec directors and having a more diverse board. And so, I mean, how do you see that? It is obviously a very different role, but they also bring value, don't they? And
yeah, I've got experience of this non-exec director role through a couple of ways, and I think there's also a sort of entrepreneur in residence role that maybe goes hand in hand with non-exec director now. I think a lot of people are turning to those entrepreneur in residence roles more and more, where they would have had non-exec directors previously. But I think they both play the same sort of role in your business, which is they become, for me, a much more integral part of the day-to-day. I know they're not day-to-day, they're only in for a certain amount of time, but they will come into the business, really get to grips with the day-to-day of the business and the way it works in a way that I wouldn't necessarily. I get to grips with people and how they work, but this is more the sort of the fundamentals of the business. They support with decision making. They hold you true to the vision, in my mind. They would add weight to board level decisions. So it's having their approval on certain decisions can add weight for the team if the NED becomes quite visible to the team as well, and brings experience, potentially having worked for a similar business or for a business in the same sort of stage. And I've worked with quite a few businesses that have got non-exec director roles in place, and I think I'm probably quite negative about them, actually. And I thought this when we
that's really interesting
talk about this. Yeah. And that's because in a lot of cases, I've seen the non-exec director come in and almost assume that they're being brought in because the founder has very little experience. So for me, I guess my word of caution, if you're a founder or CEO of business, is to be very clear at the beginning with a non-exec director that they are there to enhance your board and enhance your decision making, and to really support you, not to come in because you are failing or you're unable or you're incapable of making those decisions on your own, because I think that's a very different tone, actually. And what I've found is that that sort of non-exec role it's a much longer term one potentially than a coach or a consultant. And actually, as the senior person in your business start to evolve, it can be very difficult for the non-exec director to see that you're evolving and become more and more hands-off as they need to.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we had a really great experience with a non-exec director who he'd worked for a long time in businesses and had a lot of experience around kind of finance processes, and just, we were managing multiple bank accounts. I remember that we had multiple bank accounts, lots of client money in our accounts, which we needed to protect. And he kind of really helped us with all of those things and doing the board meetings and making sure that we were doing everything correctly. So I really, really welcomed having him on board. But one of the things that I think was important was, like you were saying at the beginning, about having an independent person if you've got a business partner. That's what he was, which was really helpful, that he was that kind of independent person that had both of our backs, and that if things were sort of tricky, he would come in and help us both. So I think and it's interesting what you say about non-exec directors, because I've been thinking, that I want to do a couple of non-exec director roles, but that obviously comes with it quite a lot of responsibility. And I think you're right. It's about, and it's also generally it's a longer term. It's about finding the right non-exec director, isn't it? It's about having a diverse board of directors. So it's making sure that that non-exec director is bringing something to the party that, that really enhances and improves the value of the business, and also supports the leadership team. But I can see that there's a place for all three, aren't there? Depending on...
Absolutely. Where I think that I have seen people struggle is that they think they need one, or they've been told they need one, and then they get somebody in who is not particularly diverse. That word diversity is really, really important, because I think you need, like you say, you need that voice of reason sometimes. You need somebody to question your decisions. You need somebody to hold you true and stop you like going off and doing crazy stuff that isn't aligned to your vision. And I think having a non-exec director that does that in a really sound way is hugely important, actually. I think where I've seen people struggle is that they feel they need to have one, and then they go off and they get somebody who's either retired or nearing retirement, and still wants to keep a hand in business. And I think the gap is too big between where they're at maybe late 20s, early 30s, and slightly beyond that, running a business that is potentially, kind of completely different to how it would have been run 20, 30 years ago. And they're getting somebody in that's trying to sort of clip their wings or tie them down to quite an old-fashioned way of doing business, or doesn't get their leadership style because it's very kind of modern.
I think you're right.
I think that's where I've seen the issues, because and that's when it's really dangerous, because that's not diverse. That's somebody trying to do identity leadership.
We could do, I definitely am going to be doing some podcast episodes around creating a diverse board and, the importance of a non-exec director and all that kind of stuff. So that will definitely be something I explore again. But listen, we have chatted for so long, because obviously we could talk for ages about all these things. I think they're all super important and really interesting. And we definitely need to have another podcast about business partners. But I just want to say thanks so much for coming on, and we will talk again soon.